Welcome to EduCurious. Today's special guest is Kelsea Savarimuthu, and she is a high school English teacher of all four grade levels, which is slightly over the top, in my opinion. But Kelsea and I worked together years ago, and I've always admired her teaching style. She is warm but structured, and she is one of the most inclusive people I know. And I am honored to have her on the show. So, welcome, Kelsea, and thank you for joining us today. I would like to hear a little bit about how you got to where you are today. Well, where are you and what are you doing lately? Because you were in my region and now you are far, far away.
Yes. So recently we moved to Morganton, North Carolina. It's actually my husband's hometown. He is an executive director of a nonprofit here in Morganton for adults with mental illness. And so it brought us back to his hometown, which is very weird. I teach actually at the high school that he graduated from. So I currently teach AP African American Studies and English 2. I've also taught English 1 and American history. I started my career as an elementary teacher, so I taught first grade for 5 years. My degree is from or is in elementary education, and so I taught first grade for 5 years, and then I had my own kids, and I just got so overwhelmed with being with little kids all day and then going home to my own little kids all day. And so I wanted to make a change. And so in 2020, dear Miss Donna Dunson accepted me as a high school teacher. And so I shifted. And it really, I was really burned out when I shifted from elementary and moved over to high school. And it reignited my passion for teaching. So I started as a US history teacher. And I went through 1 year and decided, oh my gosh, I love history. I love this, what I'm doing. This is what I've always wanted to do. I think I was a little too nervous to go into secondary at first. Like I was scared of the teenagers. Um, and so while was teaching US history, I also went back and started my master's degree. So, like I said earlier, I'm currently or I moved from Lake Wales, and so now I teach in Morganton. I've graduated. I have a master's degree, and teaching here. What am I teaching? Oh my gosh, I think I'm in my 11th year of teaching, 12th year, something like that. I've lost count.
Kelsea, tell me a little bit about where you live now, like the population, maybe the demographics, the setup of that, and how you incorporate particular teaching strategies within your population.
Okay, so we live in Western North Carolina, so the foothills of the mountains. It's beautiful. I love it. Our community, our county is predominantly rural, but I teach at probably the most diverse school in our region. We have about between 40 and 50% of our students are white. We have about 30% are African American, 20% are Guatemalan, and about 10% are Hmong, which is a region in Laos. So, I make sure that my classroom reaches all of those students. I think primarily with representation. So when they walk in my room, the posters that they're going to see on my wall, the um, pictures that I'm going to present in my lessons, I want to make sure that they feel represented in all of that. The stories that we choose. So right now I'm teaching English. I want to make sure that when I'm looking at a unit, am I using diverse authors? So that's kind of the prep beforehand. When they walk in the door, my goal is for every student to feel welcome in my room. So as soon as they walk in that door, they know that I'm going to be here to answer their questions, to talk about their day, whatever they're going to need from me when they walk in that door. Because I think when you can build that relationship, they feel much more willing to come to you for a question, but also they feel comfortable making mistakes and telling you, like, oh my gosh, I didn't know how to do this. Can I redo this assignment? And I think there's so much value in that and that learning than just letting them get the grade that they get.
Tell me about how you have inclusive teaching practices. You've got equitable lessons for such a diverse population. And your approach to just that whole, let's bring everyone together and learn something, but also realize that we come with our own stories.
First and foremost, I have this like fundamental belief that every child has the right to an education. And so when students walk into my door, I want them to know that I'm going to meet them where they're at and try to support them in the best way that I can.
And so, how do you support the diverse learners in that environment? You let them see themselves, which is critical. But then, when it comes to the academic content and the achievement and the achievement gaps, what do you do differently?
I think ultimately it's about structure. How they need to know what is going to be expected in my classroom, but also what are we going to be doing? And how can I make that to where everything is easy for them to get to? So starting off, I utilize Canvas. I think Canvas is a great platform for that because as soon as they click into my class, they have what we call our daily slides, but it is an agenda of what we're going to be doing for the day. So no matter if my student is an English language learner, if they're absent frequently because they have medical responsibilities that they need to take care of, any reason, a student can log onto that page and go through dates. So whatever day they were absent or whatever day they need, if it's that day, they can click any of the links of what we do. They know what we did for that day in class, and then they're able to have that information. I also make sure all of my notes are put there ahead of time. So if students, need like that way they don't have to ask, hey, Miss Abby, I can't see this on the board. Can you go back so I can see a slide? They can just pull it right up on their Chromebooks in front of them and follow along at their own pace if they can't keep up with what we're doing in the notes. I have found that that helps students feel so much more comfortable. They don't feel rushed to get everything written down. And then again, if they're absent, they have it ready to go. So that the daily slides are super, super helpful for that. Another thing I like to do is make sure that our objectives for the week are up on my board so they can see, okay, here's what we're doing today. So I have that displayed, but then here is what we're going to be doing for the week. Now, that's like the structure and the organization of everything. As far as my teaching, I have fallen in love with being able to teach from my iPad. I utilize an app called GoodNotes. And so I can be around my room. I can see what everybody's doing. I usually have my Chromebook or my computer pulled up with, I utilize Pear Deck a lot so that I can kind of see what they're doing. I can have my iPad to be writing notes on it. And then also with my Chromebook or with my iPad, I can model for students when we're working on a reading passage. I can model, okay, hey, we're working on characterization. How do I find this direct characterization within the text?
You provide that example in real time for them. And you're also, I was going to ask about if they're keeping up at their own pace, but sometimes the kids will have their computer away from you, like they can get a little silly, but you being able to walk around gives them the accountability that they need, which is key.
Yeah, and I love that. Being able to even teach from different places in the room helps too.
That visually stimulates the learners, which is really helpful. Now, how do you allocate time parts to teaching and being inclusive with the different learning styles? Some kids take a lot longer to learn, and some just boop, 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 right through it.
So that is such a hard, I think I find that so much harder in secondary and in English, especially because some kids are writing comes really naturally to them and they can whip out a paragraph, no problem, and it's perfect and it hits everything I need them to. But then other kids really struggle and it takes them a little bit longer and I'm having to work with them. Luckily, I do have one inclusion class this semester. I have a co-teacher, so that has been fantastic. I can kind of say, okay, here's what we're working on with this group. Here's what we're working on with this group. We can divide the classroom. What I like to do, especially for my high achievers, is in writing at least, I like to go back and say, okay, here, how can we make this better? right? Because I think as a writer, you can always make things better. We're never perfect at writing. So I'm always challenging them. Okay, how can we make this better? How can we make it more specific? How can you be more creative with this sentence? So really pushing them to use that time to add to their writing and not just spit out what they can, because I know they can do it. How can we challenge them to do more? And then on the flip side, adding that structure in for my struggling learners. I mentioned Pear Deck earlier. I love Pear Deck for teaching writing because in real time, I can have my computer open and my co-teacher also can have a link to that. And so we're monitoring where they're at. So as soon as we see a student struggling with their writing, we're right there to help them. And then again, with my high achieving students, I can say, okay, yes, you said you're done and you submitted it, but I can really quickly type some feedback on it. Even if I'm over on the other side of the room working with another student, I can type feedback. Hey, second sentence, that's the same structure as your first sentence. Why don't you change it to a compound complex sentence? And then they can do that, resubmit it, and then I see it again.
Tell me about some of the note-taking components of this. Are they all on something digital? Do they have pen and paper? How do you structure the notes? Because I know one of the people that worked really closely with you was brilliant at note organization. So dive in a little deeper on that.
Okay, so I'm a huge proponent of graphic organizers. I love for my students to be able to take information and make it work for their brain, right? I think one thing that we as educators, for a long time, it's all about memorization, right? You need to understand these, you need to know these facts, you need to be able to take them in and spit them out. For me, I don't care if they remember the exact facts that they learn in my class. I know that's probably a bad teacher's thing to say. My goal is to teach them skills. So when I'm designing my notes, when I'm designing my lessons, I'm looking at what skill am I trying to teach you here? And so with my notes, that's what I tried to get at. How can I teach you all of these different ways to take notes? And then you are able to utilize that for your whole life, not in my class. So I do a lot of two-column notes where we have the main ideas and then the details on the other side. And then I have them write a summary at the bottom. And my honor students, I think this has been fantastic for them. They are able to take that information, synthesize it, and then I have them talk with a partner and then tell me about their partner's synthesis at the bottom.
Tell me about what maybe one of your favorite organizers are, or just what's been working really well. And it might differ from class to class or from semester to semester.
So this semester is really weird. I teach my AP African American class first, and then I teach my honors English 2, and then I teach my inclusion English 2. So I teach three very, very different lessons, and I have to be three very different people for all of those groups. So for my AP class, what's working right now is what's called a tree organizer, or a tree. I think that's what it's called, tree organizer. That's what I call it. And where we have some sort of theme or idea, and then they have to tell me, okay, here are three components to that theme, and then here are some details that kind of describe it. And that works really, really well for them because it helps them to take this big idea, this theme, and make it more concrete in ways that they can better understand it to explain it for their writing in AP. For my honors kids, the two-column notes, we do a lot of that. My inclusion class, I've done something really cool with notes this year for them. We do a lot of bubble maps and double bubble maps, but I've added a picture to all of their notes. So we have our tea notes, like tea that you drink, or we had a dessert note, a cupcake note. We have leaf notes coming up next week. And so essentially, I just have them draw a picture on it to get them started while I'm trying to transition from doing warm-ups to going into note-taking. And it helps them too to remember, hey, I know what my tea notes are. I know what my cupcake notes are a lot easier than it does. Hey, get out your analysis notes from last week. They can, yeah, then that's it. I get that question. What is that? When did we do those? I don't know what that is. I can't find it. That picture has saved me so much time and effort and energy.
What are you feeling about the skill of writing paired with the innovations of AI? Have you had to bridge that? Are you feeling great about it? What are you doing?
Number one, I love AI because I use it often. I think it's like the best tool ever. And so kind of back to my idea of teaching skills, that is what I do. I have a whole lesson and a half, I call it, but on how are we going to use AI? What's an acceptable use for AI? And so we go through and we look at AI, what all it can do, have a little video on there, like the pros and cons of AI. So we talk about that. But then I really dive down and teach them, okay, how can you use AI? Because I remember I tell them this story and I feel like they think I'm so ancient when I tell it, but I was like, I say, back in the 1900s, our teachers used to be so nervous about Google. Like we were going to, it was just going to ruin the whole world. And then in reality, Google is still something that we use every day. Or I tell them about the idea that we were never going to have calculators in our pockets, and we do now. And so my job is to teach them how to use tools like this effectively, how to think critically about the tools that they're using and how they can be effective. So we come up with ideas of how we can use AI, and we use AI often in my class. It's a great support for students who struggle with writing. But how to use AI tools to construct an outline. So they come up with their thesis statement and their details, and then AI constructs them an outline. I print it out for them, and then they're able to use that to do their writing. And it has helped them so much because so many of them, it's not that they don't have the ideas, it's not that they didn't understand. It's that they don't know how to organize it. How do I put this into writing? And so AI really can help them to organize that in a great way, I guess.
Where do you see it going in the next 5-ish years?
I I just don't know. I hope that my hope is that by teaching these critical skills to the next generation of learners, that they understand that um, the ethics of AI, right? Like that we want AI to be a tool that's a useful tool to everyone, but not something that is going to take over education. I just I don't think we should fear AI, but I really think that we need to understand AI as educators and understand how it's being used outside of education, in education, so that we can equip our students to be better thinkers.
For you, staying relevant, staying plugged in, you are a lifelong learner, and that's evident in just you continue to get educated more and more for yourself. What kind of professional development do you like to engage in, and what resources do you tend to go to and use on a regular basis?
I love TikTok. I think I found more actual beneficial educational tools and ideas on TikTok than most other platforms. Follow a lot of great creators on there. Um, my use of my iPad with GoodNotes, it came from a teacher on TikTok. But then my district is really good about making sure we have PD. I'm doing right now, actually go tomorrow I'm learning like the foundations of reading all over again. So it's technically an elementary training, but I'm going back to relearn those skills because I think it's really important for my inclusion students that that never got those foundational skills, right? So we're coming up on this generation that's coming into high school right now that missed some of those foundational years from COVID. And so how can I try to fill in the gaps as a high school teacher to make sure that they can at least be able to read on a level that is commiserate with the rest of America?
Kelsea, you've got 2 kids, and I have seen pictures on Facebook. I have not met them in person, but tell me a little bit about how becoming a mom influenced your teaching practices and your kids' learning styles influenced that as well.
So yeah, I have 2 kids. I have a daughter. She's 8. Her name's Livesey. And of course, because she has such a unique name, I couldn't name my son something normal. So his name is Avit. He is 6. They're in second grade and kindergarten. Livesey is like your classic high achieving learning, right? She reads probably a chapter book a night, finishes the whole thing. She's just And she just it her brain is set up to learn traditionally how we learn in brick and mortar. It comes very naturally to her. In 2022, my son was diagnosed with autism, and he, for a long time, was nonverbal. We thought that he wasn't going to speak. He did not start speaking until he was really, he would have at 3, it was like 1 to 2 word utterances, but it was very scripted. And then by 4, he had really picked up on what's called gestalt language. So he would have scripts that he had kind of memorized, and he would just change up his scripts a little bit to communicate what he needed. But it was all about communication of needs and wants. Um, many years of speech therapy. Now that he's in kindergarten, he is really like just so vocal and being able to talk and communicate so much more. As a mom, it is like the coolest thing because it's almost like I think you get so excited when your kids start talking right at 1. It just feels so different because we've worked so hard to come this way. The other day he asked Steven a double question about something and asked a clarifying question, and I was like, oh my God. But after his diagnosis, we fought really hard to get him an IEP. And I got to see special education from the other side. And I think I was always, I tried my best to implement everything I could and to do what I could for my students. But seeing that from the other side really gave me a different perspective. Not only does my son come from the same household as my daughter with 2 educated parents, both my husband and I have master's degrees, he he learns so differently. And then within that, having to navigate the IEP process, which is, it is really difficult as a parent. So the administrative side of it is really difficult, but also the the teacher part, making sure that following through, making sure that he has what he needs every single day, and being willing to make changes and adapt things as we go. So having that entire experience with my beautiful baby boy, it has really changed my teaching in that I understand what learning differences look like in a new way. I can see those from a mom perspective, right? I think before you're like, oh, why does this kid not understand this? I've tried this many ways and they are not getting it. And really taking it back and say, okay, how am I teaching this in a way that what language am I not speaking? Just making little changes to make things easier for students and adapting your teaching in a way that's not like, why are they not getting this? But it's in a way of how can I present this in multiple ways so that more students will understand it. I think another thing that it's really kind of driven home to me is um, the importance of making like not just making education accessible, but making things evident for students. So like kind of my example with that or where I was going with that is with writing, a lot of kids feel very overwhelmed with writing. In English too, they have to take an end of course exam. That's a state level exam. And so they have to write a certain way. It's very, you have to have this, you have to have that. And so giving them sentence stems, showing them, hey, here's the formula to this writing, kind of breaking down those barriers. Or like when we're looking at multiple choice questions, hey, they design these a certain way. I can teach you these hacks. I call them hacks because they're all about hacks. This is the hack to your EOC question. Here's how they've set it up. Let's hack this. Okay. These 2, they always have 2 that are not good. So we'll take those out. And then you have the other 2 where 1 is better than that one. And so we have to look at them. So just really helping them to understand that it's not them, right? It's that these systems, these tests are designed to speak one language and they speak another. So I'm trying to teach them how do you get the understanding of that language that the test is trying to teach, or that this writing expectation is presenting.
What other ways do you meet them where they are without trying to be too much like their buddy? What are other things that you're like, this is relevant, this is important to you, da 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 da?
When I'm previewing a text, for example, for my English class, is this something that they're going to be interested in? How can I get them interested in this subject? Um, we just read, I never thought my honors class would be so enthralled with James Baldwin, right? But we read this excerpt from Notes of a Native Son, and I was so impressed with their excitement about it, because being able to make that connection to James Baldwin and his growing up and his youth, and they were able to make that connection of, oh, he was a teenager, and these are the experiences that he had when he was a teenager. I think when students are able to build those connections, whatever the text, it helps them to be engaged. It helps them to want to read it and want to do more.
What are you just super duper excited about right now? Like you wake up in the morning and you're like, gosh, like that gets me really excited.
My AP African American Studies class, it has just been the joy of my life right now, which is the nerdiest thing to say, I feel like. But my master's, my focus was in African American and women's studies in American history. And so just getting to share everything I've learned with a group of students solely focused on that has been incredible. And I have such a diverse group of kids in there. I only have 12, but it's amazing the conversations that we can have, the topics that we dive into, and really getting to have so much more in-depth conversations about things that in American history, I just kind of have to be like, okay, this was this, and then move on. Recently, we got to do, when the Kendrick Lamar halftime show, I showed him that in class, and we talked about it and we discussed, hey, what are the pieces that you pull out of this? How do you relate this? And we really had a conversation. And the best part about it, one of the moms that I'm friends with, she's actually a teacher here, texted me, and she was like, hey, I just wanted to let you know, my son came home. My husband had made some little comment about the halftime show, and he was able to give us this whole feel of like what it meant and the symbolism and all this stuff. And like, thank you so much. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're welcome. And I grew up in like a very predominantly white, upper middle class area region outside of New Orleans. But I feel like the culture kind of infuses itself. And I fell in love with diversity and diverse cultures. And I think I've always had that feeling. I I was just kind of like an armchair history nerd for a long time. And when I took on teaching the American history class at Lake Wales High School, I I felt like I don't know, I knew my curriculum, right? I knew what I needed to teach, but I was like, there's got to be so much more. I tell my students, especially when we're learning about history, it's like gossip. It's like, oh my gosh, can you believe what this person did? Why did they do it that way? That's so weird. What is going on in their head? Why would they think like that? Um, and it's, and luckily most of the time in history, we kind of get the outcome of the gossip, right? We know the whole story, and we can honestly often see both sides of the story. So we can be like, oh, John Adams thought this, but Jane Addams said this, and Thomas Jefferson thought that. So I just love that part about history. I love to, going back to that, I love the diverse perspectives that you can get in history. On the same event, you can have like 20 different perspectives and really dive into, oh my gosh, why did this person think this way? They have this bias, or oh, they think this way because they're from this town, or they grew up wealthy, or they grew up poor, or they're Black, so they understand it like this, or this person is Hispanic, so their life experiences causes them to think like this. And so being able to impart that kind of thinking onto my students is like one of my favorite things in the world. I think just going back to the idea of making sure that every student feels comfortable in your room, right? So the world is what it is, right? And we all have different ways of thinking in our personal lives. But my goal is that every student, when they walk in here, feels like they can be safe in this room. And so no matter what I believe or what I think, my outside of this room, I want to make sure every student feels like this is a place for them. And I say that because I have Black students that come into my room and feel safe here and come and talk to me about all of their stuff. I have the most redneck rural kids that come in and talk to me about their lives and their stuff and what's going on. And I I cherish that. I love it. It's what gets me excited. It's what makes me want to come in and do this job every day, to make sure that every kid feels like they can come in here and just have a safe space. And maybe they don't love reading, and that's okay, right? But maybe a little bit of my excitement will rub off on them.
Well, Kelsey, thank you so much for being on EduCurious. I loved talking with you today. I always love talking with you, but in particular, you brought up some really meaningful things that you're doing in your classroom to include all of the learners, all of the cultures, and all of the different styles. And I really appreciate that. So thank you, Kelsey.
Thank you. I
Next,
appreciate it.
next time on EduCurious, we're going to be interviewing, who knows, it might be a bus driver, it might be someone in the kitchen, it might be a PTO parent. It's going to be someone who's also passionate about education, and we want to see their perspective because we can all learn from each other, and this is a collaboration. So be sure to look at Kelsey's page on the EduCurious website because we're going to be listing some of the resources that she's mentioned. Kelsey, give us your top 3 resources again.
Good Notes app for iPad, Pear Deck, and I especially love Magic School AI.
All right, so look for the links on her page or just like and subscribe to the show and you'll get to see all the lineup coming out in the pipe. All right, well, thank you all. See you next time.